The problem in today's world is that one needs, before one says anything sensible about capitalism and democracy, we need to return to basics, don't we? What do we mean by capitalism? What do we mean by democracy? I talk to financiers all the time. I talk to journalists all the time. If you ask them what capitalism is, they are lost. They assume that they know, but if you push them, they will end up regurgitating the story about markets, a system of markets, as if capitalism is all about markets. And if you ask them about democracy, then they're completely lost, utterly lost. So let's just spend a few moments contemplating those two concepts. And I'll begin with democracy. Even though I'm an economist, my recent experiences lead me towards grappling with democracy before I go into the concept of capitalism. And let me just share part of this recent experience. In the first meeting of Europe's finance ministers, where I was representing Greece as its finance minister. I was a rookie. It was my first meeting, and as a rookie, I was afforded the floor to begin participating, presenting to the other finance ministers my agenda, the agenda of our government, what it is that we came to Brussels with in terms of proposals and predisposition. And I try to be, given my reputation as the finance minister of the radical left-wing government of Greece, of a country whose state was bankrupt and in debt to the tune of $400 billion, I try to be moderate. So I began by explaining that I understand that they were quite peeved that I was there, that I was a living and breathing inconvenience, that they would much rather the other lot had won the election. And I tried to show a degree of understanding towards that. And I said to them, the only reason why I'm here is because of the Great Depression of Greece. Greece went bankrupt in 2010, and you lot, I didn't say you lot, but that's what I meant, together with the Greek ruling elites, decided to cover that bankruptcy up by extending to the Greek state the largest loan in human history under conditions that ensured, with mathematical precision, the shrinkage of our GDP by 28%. 28%, Steinbeck, the Grapes of Wrath, that kind of magnitude and dimension. Yeah? And the people of Greece decided to send somebody like me to say to you, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to extend and pretend. We're not going to take another loan to pretend that we are repaying our debts under conditions that will continue to shrink our income and to sink our country deeper and deeper into depression. Indeed, come to think of it, it took a Great Depression to bring to power a radical left-wing Minister of Finance who went to the Eurogroup to present them something that would normally come out of the mouth of a Wall Street bankruptcy lawyer. That if the debt is unsustainable, it makes no sense to pretend that it is sustainable, that you need to restructure it, and you need to have a rethink about the loan agreement. This is what bankruptcy lawyers do in downtown here every day. They restructure corporate loans, municipality loans, all sorts of loans that need to be restructured so that the creditors can get something back. Amartya Sen, you may have heard of him, when we met some time ago, he said, "You had a very difficult time, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, I know, Amartya." He said, "You must have been the only person to have been negotiating that with creditors that did not want their money back." Because creditors want to restructure your debt. Now, what did I experience? And why is this my introduction to the concept of democracy? Okay, first meeting, I'm trying to be moderate. So I say, dear colleagues, I'm here to participate with you in a project, a joint project of rebooting the Greek economy to bring about the recovery which is necessary to produce the incomes from which you will get your money back. I understand that there is an existing program that the previous governments have signed up to. And because of the principle that the state has a certain degree of continuity, it's not that we elect a new government and we start from year zero. We're not Pol Pot. But there is also another principle, the principle of democracy. We were elected on a mandate to challenge this program. So what happens in a democratic European Union when you have two principles, continuity and democracy, clashing? We sit down and we establish common ground. We compromise. And I thought that that would be the most moderate way with which to start a beautiful friendship with my new colleagues. I didn't get a chance to put the period, the full stop to my sentence. Wolfgang Schäuble puts his hands up. Actually, you don't put, what you do is you take your name tag and you stand it on its head. That's what you do in the Eurogroup. Bang. One sentence. Elections cannot be allowed to change the economic policies applied to Greece. Then I took my name tag and stood it on its head. Having regained the floor, I said, this is a great gift to the Chinese Communist Party because they believe exactly the same thing. You see, this is, if you want, my introduction to the ways in which the neoliberal agenda that has emerged out of the second post-war phase of global capitalism has undermined the narrative of the ruling elites regarding democracy. Now they are reaching a point of having no scruples about declaring democracy null and void. No longer do they feel even the need to appropriate the mantra of democracy for propaganda purposes. Now they are, effectively, it's the greatest vindication of Lee Kuan Yew, of Deng Xiaoping. The idea that efficiency has replaced the need to consult voters. The experience I had in the Eurogroup is simply the limiting case of this. I just happened, completely accidentally, to land in that position of the finance minister of Greece. And I had the wonderful experience of actually having been told this. For the first time in my life, you will understand this as academics, I didn't have to theorize. They told me. They told me. Let me give you another example, just an anecdote, which I think is my favorite, absolute favorite. I don't know whether you feel the same way as me, but even though most people fall down laughing when I say this, I'm insecure deep down. I feel a certain degree of even intellectual insecurity. I may say things forcefully and believe what I say, but deep down in me, there is still the little boy who would like to think that the adults know what they're doing. That the good people at the IMF, who have a lot more power than I did as a Minister of Finance of a bankrupt state, in the end knew what they were doing. Something deep inside me, even though I never believed it, hoped that that might be the case. So, first time I had a long sequence of negotiations with the good people from the IMF. Tedious, 10 hours with aides, with various committees, and looking at the debt sustainability analysis, and arguing about multipliers and about elasticities. Boring. The good part happened after midnight, over a glass of whiskey in the lobby of a hotel in Brussels, with a top-notch person of that institution, whose name will remain unsaid. You know who it is. I didn't tell you who it is, but you know who it is. Anyway, so after this long day, and after I had killed myself to try to explain to these people why this program is impossible to bear fruit, that the numbers just don't add up, I heard her say, Yanis, of course you're right. This program can't work. I thought, oh no. The adults don't know what they're doing. But then immediately, I was told something else as well. But you must understand, we have invested so much of our political capital in this program that you must accept it in order to remain credible. Okay? Let me now add to this something that another person residing in this country, who actually was really wonderful to me during the difficult time of negotiations, and I really mean this. He contacted me, he called me. I nearly fainted when I heard his name on the phone, that he wanted to help me. I said to him, are you sure you want to help me? He said, yes, and he gave me very good reasons, anti-austerity reasons. And I said, Larry, do you realize that in my previous book, The Global Minotaur, I'm sure you haven't read it. He said, no, I haven't. I said, that figures, because in that book, I keep referring to you as the Prince of Darkness. And he said, at least you're referring to me as a prince. So anyway, when first time we met at another hotel lobby in DC, we were having this long discussion about, again, fiscal targets, tax rates, VAT, multipliers, structural reforms, blah, blah, blah. And I could see that his eyes were glazing over. At some point, he had enough of this conversation, and he wanted to end it and ask me a question. He said, before we continue, so that I know to what extent I can help you and what kind of help I should be giving you. And he was very helpful, I mean that, seriously. He understood that what was happening in Greece was simply prolonging secular stagnation, which is his term, for the great slow-burning recession that we have been stuck in since 2008, here in the United States, in Europe, globally. He had a question for me to find out what kind of guy I was and the extent to which I could be helped. He said, Yanis, you have to make a very important choice, a personal choice. This is a personal, moral choice. I said, okay. He said, you can choose to be an outsider. You can choose to be somebody who speaks truth to power, who tells the truth, who talks to people in the new school. He didn't mean that. He didn't say that, but he could have said that. And that will make you feel good. And you are going to have a pretty good profile, but you will be jettisoned by the political system. Or you can choose to be an insider. If you choose to be an insider, then you'll be given a modicum of power to stay within the system and to make some marginal change within. But the golden rule of the insider is that you never speak out against other insiders outside. So make your choice. Now it's clear what choice I made. Yeah?